All right, good Monday morning. This is the third and final video where I have Fredrik as a guest. We in the previous episodes we showed Fredrik's project with Pixing World, which is a neural network sandbox thingamabob, and like something like it. If you want to check those, go do so. Like, they're really great. But today we want to take a step back and more like talk about like why do a project like that, and why do projects in general that don't have a set goal in mind, perhaps that are not defined by their success or their outcome.
Right, more exploratory projects,
Exactly. That's what we're gonna talk about today.
Hello everyone, this is me, BJ from the future, and I'm here in New York City, and I'm just here to read you today's sponsor message. Today's video is sponsored by Coursera. Thank you, Coursera. Coursera partners with top universities such as UPenn, Imperial College London, Google, and IBM to provide the world's best online education experience. Coursera has over 3,000 courses in subjects such as data science, business, blockchain, you name it. Either you could go for a single course or an entire degree. Coursera is 100% online and very affordable. Go check them out at coursera.org. That link is also in the episode description. All right, let's get on with the show.
Let's do it.
All right, let's get into it.
Let me just repeat a question that I asked you in one of the earlier episodes, but we just touched on like very slightly. Like, why create this? Like, why create a why spend months and months and months and months of because you're not employed anywhere. Like, you're not employed to do this. Like, this is just you basically just I'm gonna spend a ton of my savings just sitting around coding on this project.
Yeah. Why? That's a good question.
Yeah, and it's not a startup. This is gonna be very hard to flip to.
There's no monetary upside to this, I think. It's purely a passion project. I think maybe if people didn't watch the previous episodes, I could quickly mention that what we are talking about is basically somewhere between a game and a research platform for evolution within a computer, where you create little creatures and you let them out into the world. And
basically exploration in machine learning, in evolution, and in WebGL and TypeScript.
Into all of this. And I mean, so of course part of this is the fascination of technology, and just I really love programming and just getting into that. This particular project, I mean, I've done many projects, as you know, before, and they go from everything from games into a Git tool, into a bunch of different things. For this particular one, it was just a fascination with a specific topic, which was evolution. And it started as a conversation with a friend many years ago, where we just talked about evolution for a whole summer. We were just talking about evolution because we were so fascinated. And then we started digging into...
What, did you both read the same thing? Something...
He's from Texas, and he was telling me that they didn't explain it too well in his school. It was very brushed over, and then when he was...
it was kind of we don't want to touch this because God, or...
I don't know, we didn't actually go too deep into that, but he didn't... He got curious about evolution as an adult, and then he wanted to read about it. And I'm from Sweden, and in Sweden they did talk more about evolution in school, but as he was talking about evolution, I realized that I didn't know anything about evolution as well. So it's just this super interesting topic to get into. So this kind of led us into exploring evolution, and I just got curious, and then with this project I restarted that. I got curious again for different reasons, and then just kept being curious, just discovering every day, finding something new that was oh, I didn't expect that, and just purely out of a sense of exploration, kind of going to some new country or some weird place that you never visited before, and every step you take, you kind of go oh, what's over here? Like, that's odd. And
Yeah.
like, what's...
Like, I really like the sense of like a world opening up itself when you start learning a new field.
Yes.
Like it was when I started getting into YouTubing. It was like this enormously productive feeling of like, oh my god, I can like learn this, like I learned this, like oh this is how it works, and learning about video production again, and like figuring out like oh this is the microphones that people are using, and like there's so much. You're moving so fast in your learning when you enter a new field, instead of like when I'm in web development, I'm kind of like, okay, there's Vue. It's a little bit like Redux, but it's different a little bit. Like it's just like all that, like this incremental learning. It's like no explosions in it.
Yeah, I mean, it fits into the pattern when you go from React to Vue, or however that's pronounced. But when you do that step, it kind of fits into the pattern of things you've learned. But when you go to a completely new field, it's like this sense of exploration and just something completely different.
Just feel your brain going into like this plasticity that didn't need to be.
Right. And I mean, I have to say that I love the crossover between, something that you know and something that you don't know. I mean, in this case, it's programming with evolution. And that's just fascinating because there's an interplay between these things that is a little bit unexplored. And there are many things like that where you take one thing and then you combine it with something else. And maybe no one has ever looked at those two things in combination, and you might learn a ton and, really do something that no one has been doing before.
Yeah. It's, I really like, this is, pixeling as a project is surprising. Like it's I'm not sure if you can call it art. Like my brother is an artist and he's like really picky about what you can call art. And I have this very generic, like super broad definition of art that I talk about is programming art. But it's, I mean, it doesn't have it's purely exploratory.
Right.
And it uses a medium to explore a concept.
Right.
So it's kind of like what is it feels very arty.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, like when someone paints a picture or makes a movie, that might be about exploring, like maybe a feeling or a topic or something like that. And it might be that like it's just a pathway into that. You see this painting and you go like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, what is the story behind it? And then you start diving into that topic.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about the artist, or maybe sometimes it's about what they painted. Maybe they painted like a beautiful place in a town far away, and you go like, oh, I wonder what it's like over there. And I think in that sense, this project is a little bit like art, because it's it's a window into like evolution, and you might start like in one end, and then you might become interested, and you're like, oh, I wonder how that works. I wonder how it works in nature. Maybe I want to read a little bit about it, or maybe watch some YouTube videos or something like this. So yeah, in that sense, I would say it's a little bit of art.
Yeah. I mean, a project might also not be defined by its its outcome, in the sense that it might be fun to explore a restraint.
Right.
We back in the day when I was really into TV production, we had this team that over the years had worked for a long time. We started out as like happy amateurs, and after a while, people like gone off to school and learned the proper way to make movies, basically. And a problem with that was that people then learned how hard things were.
Right.
It's when you just started out, you just like, yeah, we're gonna do like this comedy show, and you just like. That is just ludicrous, like a ludicrous ambition for someone that doesn't know it. But we managed to do it because we did not know what the fuck we were getting into.
Yeah.
So we just like, oh no, we're stuck. And the kind of normally the sunk cost fallacy is a horrible thing that you should like not fall into. But as you're getting into something and you're like just learning something, it's kind of useful.
Yeah.
I think it has evolved for a reason, that you just like, okay, this was not a good idea to learn this, but now I'm in it and I want to like actually finish it. I think it's possible that humans if we didn't have the sunk cost fallacy, humans might like be overwhelmed by the pain of learning something new.
Yeah,
or
we just quit too early. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like nobody would, even the projects that should be completed would not be completed.
Yeah, I think, naivety is similar in this way. I mean, a friend was asking me about advice about starting a company. And I mean, I'm no businessman, but like the one thing I would say about, starting something new is that being naive about it is actually to your benefit. Because if you know all of the stuff that you're going to have to do, you're going to look at it and you're going to go like, oh, okay, wow, that is way too much. But if you start and you're kind of like, oh, I can figure it out. I don't know anything about it, but I'm just going to start in one end. Then that's really to your benefit. And then along the way, you're going to discover like small problems and you're going to solve them and then hopefully get all the way to the end.
Yeah. Oh God, that is such a good insight. Like, using naivete to just power yourself through, like just throwing yourself into a project and then like getting yourself stuck in it and then using that stuckness to like complete it. That is such a painful insight, but it's I think it's generally how you get things done, because if you start getting into like listing the fears and disadvantages of something, you're gonna kill almost every project at the start of it.
Yeah, I think so.
But what I wanted to get back to with us like learning how hard things were led that to us not doing much movies at all. So to torpedo us out of this mindset, I started this project called initiative called 8 a.m. sharp. And the idea was that we met every Saturday morning, 8 a.m. sharp, and we were not allowed to have any script or even an idea. Like, we were allowed to have sort of an idea, I think. And at 6 p.m., I believe, the same day, we were supposed to have a finished movie uploaded on YouTube.
All right.
That was the restriction. Like, make a movie in a day and make it like every other week. And the thing is, like, this was also an event where everyone was welcome. Basically, as anyone could show up, like in our circle of friends. And that meant that, and also like they brought gear. So sometimes we had like this huge team of two. We had two on-set teams that were divided into different locations. And on some days we had like 2 people and a cell phone camera. But like the rule was like, always make do with what you have. We're gonna make a movie and we're gonna make it hell or high water.
All right. Yeah, I mean, there's a good anecdote from the Jack White, the artist. I used to really love the White Stripes, and I learned everything I could about them. And then one thing that he was saying was that he talked as well about like restrictions and how that can breed creativity. And he was saying that on stage, what he would do would be to always move his instruments a bit further out so that it would be harder for him to get to them, because he would have to switch between all these instruments on a live set. And it was just so fascinating to me that, like, a world artist would do something like that to himself.
Yeah.
Make it harder so that you could be more interesting and more creative with it.
That is amazing. Yeah, I think that programming tools are way too focused on making things easier and more productive.
Right.
Like, it would be so, like, I read this article where somebody was like, what's it like to work without version control? It was because he had like this coding environment on an iPad and didn't have version control, and he just like, this is interesting. I wonder what this will do with my coding.
Yeah.
Now that I because it was an era without version control, I worked without version control for years because it wasn't like a big thing. Like deploying through FTP and copying, like, we're copying, like it's now a zip, and like
versions of the file with different endings. And
that were dark ages. So much time wasted. Version control is a really good thing, but working without it has this interesting side effect. You just start programming very defensively. Right. And what he found himself working in these super small units that he didn't have to change a lot. So he just broke extreme function extraction into files.
All right.
So like everything, like, okay, now this seems like a cohesive unit. Now I can kind of make this permanent by extracting it.
Oh, interesting.
So function extraction was like...
So in a way, he was himself his own version control system. He just had to act the part of the version control system. Yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, also, I mean, creative restriction is also, I mean, nothing is more daunting than like what you have here, which is a blank sheet of paper. There's like nothing on it. It's everyone's like biggest fear of like, and I think code editors in a way are like that as well. Like you open up with like, you know, this blank nothing. And
how do you get started?
Yeah, how do you want to do something, but you're like, there's nothing, what do you do? And it's...
Yeah, like getting started and like getting yourself like your creative juices flowing is like, that's such a big topic in itself.
Yeah.
I started reading but got stuck in this book called The Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp. I think it's called that. If it is, I like this link in the episode description. And she has like this, she's a choreographer, and she has done this for so many years, and she's very successful, and she's like ultra methodical with her creative approach. Like she has like, this is how I do, like this is how I do with boxes, this is how I do, like it's very, very practical, and there's a lot of forms like to fill out, and like so that you can identify your own creative profile and that what you like creatively. And it's just so fascinating to see a person that works with creativity as like their main craft. Like programmers are creative, but for us, like problem solving is kind of like the core issue. And I think that it's fascinating for another person to read a book like How to Solve It, for instance, which is a book about like how to solve complicated problems and how to approach it. So programmers are a lot like very good at like being approached with a problem and having like, I have no idea how to solve this.
I mean, I would say that programming is such a, I mean, it started out as like one thing, but like it's such a wide, it can be problem solving.
Yeah.
But I think, in my opinion, it can also be extremely exploratory. I mean, what else can you literally start with nothing and then end up with like, you know, a deep world that you can enter? Like you can build a game, right? You can build the 3D game just by coding. And to me, it's like it's such an incredibly creative tool. But at the same time, it can also be this tool where it's only like a very simple hammer. Yeah. You just go fix a very simple problem with it.
That's really interesting. You know, it's tech interviews, like the thing that we use to qualify, is this a good engineer to let into our companies? They're very problem oriented. Yeah. They're very like list like, okay, implement sort of like quick sort. I don't think people do that anymore, but it's like solve this problem. And in my experience, like the really successful software teams in organizations where I've worked had been people that are pretty innovative and are good at like, okay, what if we just do blah? It's
I mean, it's a little bit like, you know, painting that, you know, you might, if you're a company and you paint walls or you paint in general, and you might hire people and you give them a brush and you're like, can you use this? And then some of them might be like really good at painting a wall.
Yeah.
But then, you know, if you want to create art, or like you want to create something that is not just solving the problem of covering the wall with paint, then it's the same tool, but it's the combination of using that tool and the creativity of it. And I think programming is it's such a wide spectrum of this. Like it's really like a paintbrush. You can go all the way from simple to super complex.
Yeah. I think that it might also be colored a little bit by how organizations divide themselves. They kind of like programmers are shoved into this corner where they're supposed to be the ones implementing the creative ideas of the designers and the product owners. While in reality, like it's probably, I really hope that we find ourselves in a reality where you can make programming more high level, so that it's more accessible to people that are of creative professions, so that there's actually, you don't have to spend so much time on learning programming, that you also have space for another craft, like design or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, learning programming is really like that. I mean, first you learn how to use the tool, but then you also have to learn how to be creative with it, or how to like solve problems that aren't just like, how do I take this data and move it from here to here, and these types of problems.
Just thinking like, what were we talking about? We were talking about like projects that we create without the need for a specific outcome. We don't use it like, okay, we're gonna solve this problem in the world, or we wanna, like, I need to make money for my house.
Right.
It's
I'm not sure, to be honest, exactly what the conclusions around these projects are.
I know.
I mean, I think it's perhaps the takeaways that it can be good to do these things sometimes, where you kind of let yourself be curious and explore something. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of times, especially for me, like I know a lot of times it doesn't lead to anything that's particularly interesting. But then again, like it's sometimes you come to something interesting, and also like just the process of exploring is in itself like a bit of a gift. I think it's the sense of being in a landscape that you've never seen before.
And also exploring is a bit different from learning. Because learning is more like, then you can take a course, like then you can like, okay, I'm gonna take this paved path that somebody that thinks this is the way of learning TypeScript or WebGL has taught me. Exploring is more like, okay, now I kind of know this. What can I do with it that I haven't done before, that maybe no one has ever done before? Right. How can I combine this with this other weird tool that I also happen to know?
Right.
Or how can I apply this to this weird problem? Is that even possible?
And I think it's actually a great way to learn programming in the first place. I mean, for me, that was really the path of learning programming, just being curious about like what I could do, even when I knew almost nothing. I mean, someone showed me how to do, write 3 lines of quick basic back in the Stone Ages. And with that, like I could put things together, and like it didn't make any sense, but the sense of then exploration and going like, oh wow, if I combine it like this, I wonder what happens. And that was a great way to like learn programming. I think that's...
So I think that's the first leg that we talked about. And then we talked about instead of that was exploration, and then there was also limitation, like posing yourself, like starting to explore what is it like to create in a limited setting. Like what happens if you disable version control? What happens if you work without, like what happens if you work in a much simpler editor than you do? Like what like if you don't have static typing, if you don't have unit testing, what if those tools were not invented and you could not invent them for some reason due to, like, I don't know, patents? What would you create?
If you didn't have an internet connection?
Oh, yeah. That is true, yeah. That's like...
It might almost be impossible, I would say, now to actually write a program without an internet connection. But...
Yeah, because we're so dependent on like basically just NPM.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times, like the way I program is that I come to a problem and I'm good at Googling. Like that's probably my most important skill as a programmer, that I know how to search for the solution to a problem.
Oh God, if you don't have Google, how would you do it?
Yeah, like you come to a point and you're like, oh, okay.
But I actually accidentally had a sort of experience like this in a company where, like, there was this software, it was written in Smalltalk, and it was like compiled down to this binary file, and they didn't have the fucking source code. No, so, but it was a critical part of their business processes. So I basically had to, but they did have input and output files. So I could provide it with an input file and an output file, and see what that output produced, and then I could match that with the rewrite that I was making.
Interesting.
So it's kind of like this. It became this weird type of game, And it kind of created like I had to invent a completely new way of solving problems that I hadn't.
That's it, and that ties nicely back to neural networks, I think, because if you had enough of those input and output files, you could actually just train
precisely.
To do that.
That is actually like an amazing point, and they probably, to be honest, had that amount of information because it was a catalog company that had years and years and years worth of data.
There you go.
So yeah, you could probably train a neural network on that. That would be that would be so interesting. That I should definitely have done that if I was there now. To spend their time. It was a horrible company to work for.
Don't think about it.
Well, like they're actually like they're bankrupt now. Actually, so it's like,
okay.
I feel good about it. Google killed them. All right. Oh yeah. That's 25 minutes. I think is there anything else we should say before we wrap up? We should encourage you, the audience, to talk about like what are projects that you have created that have been beneficial to you but have been made without like a set goal or outcome in mind. That would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Please write them in the comments or on the Fun forum if you're a patron. And we can't promise that we'll reply to everything, but we will read everything. Like my pronunciation today is like, it feels like I'm tripping over my tongue. It's like huge in my mouth.
Future New York MPJ here again to remind you that you should check out Coursera, our sponsor of today's show. Coursera.org, also in the episode description.
If you're new, you have just watched an episode of Fun Function. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. If you're forgetful, you will forget that. So you can click here in order to subscribe or watch another episode right now by clicking here. I am MPJ.
I'm Fredrik Noren.
Until next Monday morning, stay curious.